we have a voice because there's this task force with a person that we can carry that message right into those halls at agencies in Washington, D.C., instead of just having to sit and read the newspaper and be like, oh my gosh, now they're doing this. Oh my, you know, it creates a coordinated process. Coordination is like a highway. There's got to be two directions. It's not a one-way street. They talk with us, we talk with them, we work together. That's how these things are supposed to work, and I think that's what they are looking for.
One of the things that they did clarify for you is that the President had in executive orders, but also in direct instructions to them, that they were to coordinate with local governments.
Yeah, they have to work with local governments. They have to do.
Yes, I saw that in the executive orders.
Right. Yep. It's part of it. It's in writing. It's on paper. And now.
Well, gentlemen, that's what I wanted Jeff to have a chance to talk with you about. If you have any other questions of him, if not, we'll move on to to Dr. Siegel and the medical.
I think I read all the I did some research. I read all the information about Heartland, and I see what your point was, and I could see how the coordination would be greatly needed and needed to get a voice up there. I mean, that's what this government's for. And I read all the orders. I read all the information that was processed here. I just had just one question. Even though you see a 50 person entity that employs people in Windham is considered a big entity. I mean, because you're a town like Windham. We don't have too many 50 person employees. I mean, that's not only 50 people that are employed there. The daycare centers, that because of the 50 people that go to work. I mean, it's not, you know. It's not a big city where you get 1,000 people or 2,000 people work. 50 to Windham in a town like Highland, I would assume 50 people that are impacted by the deeming regulations is something that gets you right in the heart. And
it does. It does. Anytime in a municipality you have, and that's not even including just the impact it has on those people. They work so hard. They tell you to go out and be an entrepreneur and follow your dreams. This company does it. And it's like, now we're going to stop you. And honestly, from my end, one thing that upsets me is it's like you might as well just take that small business where someone worked so hard and actually cares about people that's in Little Heartland and hand it to Big Tobacco, because that's who's going to just take over it. They'll come in, they have the money to do it, and the little guy just gets forced out. But yeah, it has an extreme impact. As you said, it's a snowball. It's like you take a snowball and set it on the side of the mountain and watch it go, because the gas they buy there and the stuff they buy at the grocery store and the kids that are in the daycare and the schools that have the attendance, and on and on and on and on and on and on and on. It has an extreme impact. So it's no doubt about it. No doubt about it.
One of the items that I discussed with Joel is that no matter what the size of the business is, it could be 50 people, 500 people, there's still an impact on the community, and it's a domino effect. It flows all the way down to even to the daycare center in the morning, to the Dunkin' Donuts where I picked up my coffee, which is owned by a local Windham resident that has Dunkin' Donuts in town. But I can see where you're coming from. I thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jeff.
Thank you guys very much for what you're doing. I think it's great.
Gentlemen, it's going to take us a few minutes to set up. Dr. Siegel, because of his schedule, we recorded his testimony. However, if there are questions that you have of him, we're going to submit them to him, and he'll be glad to answer them. It may be that we can get him on the telephone to answer them at the end of this recording. If not, he'll answer them in writing and give them to you following today.
Agenda that you had kindly provided us here. Looks like we had a break coming up. We were going to hear from Linda Hansen as well, who's right here. Do we want to do that before the break or after we set up?
We're going to do that a little later because, frankly, I'm going to ask Linda to kind of wrap up things as we go along if there's other things that are missed. She's kind of my cleanup hitter. So we take a break if we can and have John set up for the doctor's testimony. And while he's doing that, I'd like to introduce you to Jesse Augustine, who is here. Jesse is counsel to the Great Lakes forest industry, who got introduced to coordination several years ago. She is interested in coordination, is a young lawyer who hopefully will stay interested in it, and the industry that she is working with is certainly interested in it. And Andrew Aguilar, who is here, Andrew is, Jesse, by the way, graduated from Lawrence University and Chicago Kent College of Law, which my professors at the University of Chicago always called the second best law school in Chicago, for obvious reasons. Andrew graduated from Berkeley for his undergraduate in Southwestern law for his law degree. He is probably senior counsel to me at this point, and I'm hopeful that both of them will try to succeed me in keeping this going, because it's definitely something that benefits local governments. So with that, I just asked John Morrow if he'd get set up so that we can get to Dr. Siegel for you.
back over to Fred Kelly Grant, and please go ahead and introduce the next person that's going to talk to us.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Siegler is a professor at Boston University in Public Health and Administration. And as I said before, he's recognized throughout most of the nation as probably the premier expert medical doctor in tobacco control. He's studied it for 29 years. He has studied other forms of addiction or habit, and particularly with emphasis on youth. I have to apologize for the kind of lackadaisical way that I perform on this, because I forgot that we were recording testimony that would be given. I was thinking of interviewing a witness, but he took up the slack. So I think you'll get the information from him. Without further ado, I would just ask them to start this video. And as I said, if there are questions that come up for you, we will be glad to try to reach him by phone. But if we can't reach him by phone today, he'll answer those and do it in writing and get them to you. Because we have certain questions too that have come up since we've watched this. So with that, gentlemen, I would ask them to run this video for you. Dr. Siegler, Dr. Michael Siegler.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Dr. Michael Siegel, who is one of our feature witnesses, the feature witness in this informational meeting. Dr. Siegel received his bachelor's degree from Brown University. A very prestigious college, kind of on the same level as my College of Idaho. In fact, I think they're going to play each other one of these days. He received his medical degree from Yale and master's in administration, I believe, probably that is, from Berkeley. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was a master's in public health.
Okay. And Dr. Siegel is now at Boston University. He's a professor, but he's also an expert witness and has testified in many cases. He is an expert in public health and administration, and of course that's what we're going to talk about with regard to vaping. Dr. Siegel is a professor in the Department of, just one second here. I made notes from, because I've been on the road, the Department of Community Health.
Yeah, community
at
health
Boston
science.
University School of Public Health.
Correct.
He has 32 years of experience in tobacco control. And he has done research in disease control with the Center for Disease Control in many, many areas, including alcohol, I noticed, and particularly involving youth, which is one of the big problems that the Commissioner of Food and Drug has talked about, Doctor. Welcome to this information meeting, and I'm glad you're here to testify for us.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
What I would like to start with is if you would tell us, please, what your experience with the vaping industry has been, and I'm just going to let you tell us what you believe the medical problems are that face us because of smoking of cigarettes, and how the vaping industry and vaping instruments can affect that.
Well, I've been studying the issues of tobacco, especially the health effects and policy issues related to smoking for about the past 3 decades. And, you know, I think to start off, there's no question that smoking is the leading preventable cause of death in the United States. It causes an estimated 420,000 deaths each year, primarily from heart disease, lung disease, and cancer. And it's important to recognize that tobacco smoke contains over 10,000. Carcinogen is human carcinogen. We're referring to a chemical that can cause cancer specifically in humans. There are some chemicals that can cause cancer in animals, but they won't cause a problem in humans. So when we say there are 60 known human carcinogens in tobacco smoke, that means there are 60 chemicals in there that are known to cause cancer in humans.
Okay, of the ones that have
There are at least 6,000 chemicals in tobacco smoke which just haven't been identified. Many of them could also be carcinogens, but we just don't know at this point.
Okay, thank you for that. Go ahead now.
So
I'm sure everybody else knows that on
well,
listening to.
So it's important to recognize that, but the second thing that's important to recognize is that most people who try to quit smoking fail. Only about 3% of people today who try to quit smoking are able to do so successfully. Smoking is a very, very strong addiction, and it's important to recognize that the current treatments that are out there, such as nicotine replacement therapy and other FDA-approved drugs like Chantix and Zyban, are actually not very effective. They only work about 10% of the time. So that means that 90% of people who are given a prescription for Zyban or Chantix, 90% of people who go buy nicotine replacement therapy, whether it be nicotine gum or nicotine patches or nicotine inhalers, 90% of those smokers are going to fail to quit. Now, doesn't mean that those treatments are not useful for many people and that they should be taken off the market. It just means that the majority of people trying those methods are not going to succeed. And so that's the backdrop in which vaping products came on to the market in the United States. And the reason why vaping products have caught on so much for smokers is because nicotine replacement therapy and smoking cessation drugs are just not very successful. With a 90% failure rate, we really need some other alternative. Smokers need some other alternative. I mean, a 10% success rate is just not good enough for a behavior that causes 400,000 deaths a year. And so the idea behind electronic cigarettes or vaping products is that they not only address the nicotine addiction, but they address the behavioral and psychological and social aspects of the addiction. So there's a little bit of a myth that nicotine is really the only reason why people are addicted to smoking. And it's just not true. If you talk to any
My pleasure. I'm Fred Doucette, Windham, Salem, an adjoining town, as a state representative.
perhaps it's,
I'm also assistant
having a
majority
cigarette
leader of the New
first
Hampshire
thing when you
House. Let's see, I started out serving in the United States Navy as a corpsman. Was lucky enough after my service to years. I've been retired for some 5 years now, and I now continue to serve the public as a volunteer legislator in the state of New Hampshire.
Thank you. Thank you for your service.
I've asked Jessie to talk with the gentleman, and she has some questions I think she wants to direct to him, if we can go ahead with that.
Sure. Salem. It's a town of, it's neighbors to Windham here. Our demographics are a little different. We have a bedroom population, roughly 30,000, but we're a border town with Massachusetts and New Hampshire being the live free or die state. No sales tax, no income tax, etc. We get an influx from anywhere from 150,000 up, depending on the time of year, weekends, things like that. We have a large amusement park in town, so we see a lot of people in town.
Do you have any vaping shops in Salem?
I actually have, vaping proper, we have 9 shops in Salem, but also coupled with what I just said about the lower taxes on cigarettes, we have people come in from Massachusetts to buy their cigarettes and alcohol for that matter. A lot of these proper cigarette shops also sell vaping equipment and the e-juice. So we have 9 shops dedicated to vaping specifically, but there's numerous shops that sell the product itself.
Are you a smoker?
I am a smoker.
Are you trying to quit?
I have set a date to quit smoking, and I plan to utilize vaping because I have my oldest son, who was a smoker for a number of years, quit using this product, and my ex-wife and I get along fairly well. She also was a smoker and quit using vaping.
You said you were a retired firefighter and a paramedic. Could you talk a little bit about your experience in those capacities that you saw, what impact smoking has on the community?
Sure. I mean, it's common sense that a unit that you inhale water vapor is much different from a cigarette that's lit with fire and smoked and produces a head of ash. I wish I knew how many times and I was also the fire inspector for a period of time, we would have a fire, go in and find out it was improper disposal, or somebody fell asleep with a cigarette or a cigar in their mouth. And some of these instances were fatal fires. So that's another benefit, you know, not that it's the crux of the argument, but that's another benefit in my estimation. And also on the medical side of things, earlier on in my career, ran into people who were smokers like myself, and it's kind of the thing that rings in my skull is one particular man that we would visit his home multiple times for 911 calls. He had a facial jaw cancer, and it was into his throat, and it was just horrific looking, and it was from smoking, according to his physician. And the last ambulance call we went to his house was the fact that the cancer had eaten through his carotid artery, and I don't want to get too explicit, but it was pretty messy. There was nothing we could really do for him. We transported him. He passed the next day. So I myself have been smoking far too long. I've never had the drive to quit smoking until I saw my son, my oldest son. Dad, you know, why don't you try this? It worked for me, and he was a fairly heavy smoker. You know, probably my fault because I smoked around him all the time. But I'm gonna, you know, that date's coming up relatively soon, and I plan on being a non-smoker and a vapor from worked for the majority office and a number of other committees, Ways and Means. I bring the message to those folks.
Have you had any experience with vaping regulations, taxes in New Hampshire?
Actually, and I'm trying to remember whether it was this past year or the year before, there was legislation put forward to tax, and of all places, New Hampshire, to tax e-liquids, not the equipment, but the quote-unquote juice, which failed the House. So.
In your capacity as a leadership position in the state legislature, have you ever been contacted by any federal agency, or are you aware of any contacts in relation to vaping regulations?
I've never been contacted, and I do not have any information that anybody in the legislature has been by federal means or federal ends of anything, not to my knowledge.
If proposed regulations were to go forward from the federal government, do you view that as having a potentially positive or negative impact on Salem and the state of New Hampshire?
Well, I sit here this morning for the sole purpose of the fact that it will impact small business. These guys are small businessmen, guys and gals, that open So if this were to become a federal issue and they were to, say, tax it or something like that, it would have a detrimental effect on not only these shops, but the people they employ. You know, it seems to be a thing that's gathering steam. Like I said, there was 1 or 2 shops maybe a year or so ago, 2 years ago, and now we're up to 9 specific shops for vaping, and the plethora of other, I can't even begin to tell you how many just regular cigarette shops there are. People buy that much coming over the border. But I see it as an obstacle to small business, an obstacle to jobs. You know, it just doesn't make sense, in my estimation.
I think that's all I have. Anybody have any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Doucette, for Representative Doucette. For coming here to talk to us. A lot of great points. One in particular I hadn't really thought about was the fact that the greater Windham and Salem area is right over the border of Massachusetts. We are within, I believe, about 18 to 20 miles of a few million people. So even though we are small communities, we're extraordinarily close to millions of residents. Many of them do come right over the border. They come to our many of our shops, not just the liquor and the cigarette shops, but they do come to many of our shops. One of the top probably 5 things they do come for is our tobacco products. And I really hadn't thought about that, but yes, anything in the tobacco versus vaping kind of space that impacts this area is going to have an outsized impact to many different other areas throughout the country, simply because we are right on the border. You know, we have our own exits. Each of our cities has our own exits. Windham is exit 3 off of 93, and we do have probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions of folks come over the border from Massachusetts on an annual basis, largely impacting this industry. So thank you for bringing that up. I think that's a really important point we need to consider. Thank you, Mr. Doucette.
Thank you, Fred.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I think we're ready to go again. I think maybe the machine will work again.
Wake up in the morning. Perhaps it's having coffee with cigarettes or reading the newspaper while you have a cigarette. And there are social aspects of smoking. Obviously, people can smoke together. There's a social aspect to it. And all of these aspects are important parts of smoking addiction. And so this is really the reason why nicotine replacement therapy doesn't work very well. Because if you take a nicotine patch and put it on, it will substitute for the nicotine, but it doesn't substitute for the behavioral and physical aspects of the addiction. And the beauty of electronic cigarettes...
Doctor, I've heard that, excuse me just a minute, I've heard the term ceremony used. Quit work and do something different. In other words, when I used to say, well, let's go have a drink, I'm finished. Don't keep working, but quit, but just do this. That's kind of part of what what you're talking about here with smokers.
Exactly, because those behaviors are conditioned to be tied to in your case, alcohol. In this case of smokers, those stimuli from smoking. And a nicotine patch, it's not going to do that because you're just sticking the patch on and you're not changing anything, preventing withdrawal symptoms. And so, for the majority of smokers, actually 90%, there are a huge number of smokers out there who are just not able to break the addiction to the behavioral. And the question is, what do we do with them? Do we just tell them, well, sorry, you have to, methods? And as a public health practitioner, I don't find that to be a satisfactory answer. Given the fact that 400,000 people are dying every year, given the tremendous health risks of smoking, I don't think it's satisfactory to just say, well, if you don't like the FDA nicotine replacement therapy doesn't work for you, nothing we can offer you. And so
We wouldn't do that in the case of a disease, would we?
no, I mean, there's no.
If it were a disease, we wouldn't do that.
No, there's.
And so, okay, I understand what you're saying, and I wanted to be sure.
So,
To resolve the technical difficulties here.
Because a lot of the others, I don't want to just hold up. So,
in the interest of keeping things flowing very smoothly, though, can we not simply
live witness that we would call would be, that's not reliant on this, would be Jesse. And Andrew is going to handle this. And gentlemen, one of the things that we did, we analyzed what the commissioner said in the Commissioner of Food and Drug, in his announcement to his staff following the letter that he got from Heartland. And he identified certain things that in the industry he believes needs to be corrected and needs to be taken care of. with regard to standards and regulation is internet sales. And the sale asked this witness to testify as to the capability of verifying age, of making sure that this doesn't happen. And so, and Andrew has talked with the witness, questions and directed. And so we're going to move to those things. We'll come back to the medical. But these are the things that local government can suggest to the commissioner to block that he would face.
Thank you. Well, welcome to Jesse Kamzol, former Chief Data Officer, Republican National Committee. Thank you for joining us here in Windham, New Hampshire. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, Jesse. Thanks for being with us. Could you just tell us a little bit about
one aspect that is good is 190 million registered voters. And then also a separate database of 315 that you're actually consuming. We use that for analytics. And commonalities in this situation is what I cared about also was people that were 18 and over. So it aligns pretty perfectly.
Can you talk a little bit about how the software works and how it's used practically?
Sure. So essentially, we have what's called registration prospects. So we're looking at voter fraud and then people that we need to re-register. A fancy way of saying it is what's called an API, which is Application Programming Interface. All it is really is two computers talking to each other.
To produce this type of security, would you tell the gentleman about that, please?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
And Jesse, the other thing that I asked, in my experience with data systems as a trial lawyer, and I know that there's always, if you can create a security system, there's a way you can beat it.
It's always going to happen. I mean, like I said before, voter fraud, we still have roughly 1%, and we have some of the most sophisticated systems in the country. I mean, otherwise we wouldn't be able to detect these types of things. There's always going to be ways to slip through the cracks. I mean, even the biggest companies like Sony got hacked, you know, or people will find ways around it. You know, there's nothing you can do about it. You know, like I bought beer when I was under 21, so I found a way around it. So.
And so, basically, what you do in a data system is you build different levels, don't you, so that it becomes more difficult to break in.
Exactly. So that's the beauty of technology these days. Given with all the cloud services that are available through Microsoft and Amazon or anyone else that you would like to choose, there's way too much data on people these days that you'd be kind of scared of. So I pretty much know how much your house costs. I can tell you what magazines you subscribe to. I can tell you everything that you'd ever want to know, how many children you have, everything. So it's all out there. So this is new over the last decade that we actually have more information on people than ever before. So it's actually scary. So on an average individual, we have about 3,000 data points.
Fred, I have a question. Are the feds really worried about age verification?
Pardon?
Is that something they're really worried about? Age verification. I mean,
Go ahead, Andrew.
I can, from my aspect.
Yes, it's a big issue.
It's not in the hand because unfortunately our largest employer in the state, Rockingham Park, is gone now. And to bet online, you have to be a certain age verification, because people have been verified that they're over 21 and can gamble. I mean, are they making a problem that isn't a problem?
Yeah, it's a problem. I think it's a combination of it. I think you'll get into the testimony later. You'll see because of marketing, advertising, and packaging issues, they want to make sure that nicotine is not being sold to minors.
But if I kind of follow up my colleague, Mr. Breton, Mr. Kamzal, if I'm hearing you correctly, the It's believed that the issue of age verification can be effectively managed due to the data we have on folks, so we'll be able to determine if someone under 18 is searching for these products, trying to purchase these products, and then in turn, it's believed that we have the technology necessary to prevent the folks purchasing vaping products are 18 or older.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. So same idea of what voter registration, you know, so we don't want to waste our time trying to register someone that's under the age of 18, because you can't. So, but yeah, absolutely. So.
Okay, and again, from other industries, I'm kind of familiar with this, so.
Absolutely, we do it currently. So essentially, if you want to do, you know, Facebook ads, or you want to do, you know, Google ads or anything else like that, it's scary how much information we have in individuals.
Okay.
So
if the government says you cannot market these products to folks under 18, it's believed that that can be effectively controlled.
Absolutely, it'd be a waste of money.
That's the only question I had.
All right. Anything else, Andrew? Jesse, thank you very much.
Absolutely,
Appreciate
thank you. Thank you for your time, gentlemen.
Thank you for coming to Windham.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I love coming up here.
Gentlemen, I would ask Jim Bolton, who's here, to come ahead and testify. I was going to have Jim follow up the doctor and Mark Antoine, but his testimony is vital, and it's independent in many ways, and so I'll go ahead with that. I don't know what progress we've made. Any with this, Jesse? None? Okay. Jim, would you tell the gentleman? I'm sorry. Did you want to say something to him? I was going to have him say who he is and identification.
No, just welcome, Mr. Bolton, to Windham, New Hampshire. Thank you for coming today.
Yes. So I live in Greenland, and I own a retail store in Plastow. We've been there for 2 years, and then I also manage 4 other retail stores in New Hampshire and 1 in Maine.
Jim, would you tell the gentleman how many customers do you have in the store that you own?
We have, well, thousands, about 2,000. People that have purchased in our store. 500 are active. 500 customers a month. 250 of them are new. To that, there's probably about 25% of them are people that smoke cigarettes that are looking to stop.
And what about in the stores that you operate? The 5 stores you operate, what about customers there?
It's very, very similar.
Would you tell the customers that you have, were they smokers?
Were they smokers?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
And are they using the vapor device? As a means of stopping smoking?
Yes.
Would you tell the gentleman, please, what you've learned from them about their experience? Well, first of all, let me do this. You were a smoker too, right?
Yes.
How long did you smoke?
15 years, 17, 10. Yeah.
Okay. And are you still smoking?
No,
And why not?
because I vape.
Okay. And what made you decide that you...
Because I just didn't want to smell like smoke. I mean, I was kind of, I didn't even think of the health aspect. It was just, I didn't want to smoke. I'd smoke in the morning, I'd smoke at night, but going into meetings and everything. I didn't want to smell like a cigarette. So I rebelled a little bit when I first, bought my first vaporizer, but I had a cigarette on the way home from the vapor store, and that was the last cigarette that I had. That was about three and a half years ago, 4 years ago.
What have you experienced since you started vaping and quit smoking cigarettes?
Well, I don't smell. I can taste again. I couldn't really taste anything. I can smell. Actually, I can breathe better. When I do get a chance to work out or run, I can, I don't have this burning feeling in my lungs anymore.
Would you tell the me yesterday and told me stories about what you've heard from your customers about their health and their conditions since they quit smoking?
Yeah, very, very similar. I mean, people talk about how, they'll buy a bottle of vape juice at first towards a tobacco flavor if they, smoke lights or something like that, or menthol. Sometimes, if they stop smoking, which a lot of them do, they come back and say, this tastes awful. They can actually taste the liquid. So that was similar for me. Our customers also talk about that they can go, they can walk up the stairs again. They would walk upstairs or help somebody move or move themselves, and they'd have a hard time doing it. Or they wouldn't be able to play sports. They would sit out on any type of, sporting activity or something like that. Oh, sorry.
Do you know any of your customers who have stopped smoking and begun to vape, who have then gone back to smoking cigarettes? Dr. Siegel for people to quit smoking cigarettes. That it's the only thing he knows of that can allow them to maintain their cessation of smoking. From your experience, would you agree with that?
Yes.
He also testifies that
I can go on with that for a little bit. I didn't realize how strong the hand-to-mouth fixation is. There's the nicotine delivery, but it's also, like he was talking about, the behavioral. I'll go on a patch, they'll buy a vapor product, 0 nicotine, which also we sell about, in just one store, we sell over about 1,200 bottles a month. And at least 200-300 of those bottles are 0 nicotine, which I worked myself down to, and I couldn't believe after, even a month, when I didn't have my vaporizer, I'd look around seeing where it was. So I'm a little different type of device because they don't vape as much as somebody that vapes nicotine. But still, it stays strong for a while.
the doctor also testified that, or will testify, that flavors in the liquid, the nicotine is in the liquid in a vaping device, is that right?
Yes.
And he testified that the flavors are necessary for the person who's going to be successful in staying off of smoking cigarettes. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Why is that?
Real light, I would smoke it, but I wouldn't want it. I'd go, right back to Camel Lights. With vaping, it's, people don't really have that much brand loyalty or even flavor loyalty at all. So they'll start with, let's say they smoke, Marlboro Lights and they get a tobacco flavor. The tobacco flavor could be mixed with caramel or vanilla. And then they can taste again, and then they go to maybe a vanilla and strawberry. And then from there, it'll move them to strawberry watermelon or grape, candy or something like that. And it goes around, because after a couple bottles, somebody goes to the next flavor and the next flavor, so we have to have a lot of flavors. But we also, to keep our regulars happy too, we have to constantly circulate, over 200 flavors. And it definitely by the season as well. So like right now, lemonade is real hot, and these are people that did smoke. Gross, tasting cigarettes. And then in the winter, like now apple, the fall, like apple's gonna be, believe it or not, eggnog, and then, but the heavier desserty flavors in the
If you didn't have the flavoring in the liquid, what does the nicotine flavor itself, what is it like?
It tastes like peppery.
It's not very pleasant, I understand.
No.
And so the doctor and others have testified that flavoring is critical, and he testified that under the deeming regulations, applying for and approving those flavors would have put businesses out of business because they couldn't survive without the flavors.
Right. And we couldn't survive without new flavors.
Right, new flavors.
Yeah, because even if, it stops, there's a ton of flavors out there, but there's only so much, you can pull from or you want to pull from because it's easy to get or not, to purchase. there's you just have stale flavors, you know, and people have vape, you know, a different bottle every single week, you know, that could happen pretty quick.
So do you agree with the doctor that flavoring is not just a fad, it is a critical part of the use of vaping as a substitute for smoking?
Yes.
In San Francisco and in Oakland and other towns in California, the city councils have banned flavoring. In your opinion, what does that do to the industry in those towns?
It crushes it.
Jim, from the standpoint of your customers and what you observe from them and from yourself, what role do you see in this course? What economically and socially and culturally, from the standpoint of the existence of your business and businesses like yours?
Right. So, well, on the customer level, you know, we hear customers all the time that actually do a budget and they see how much they've smoked on cigarettes. I mean, how much they paid smoking cigarettes, how much it costs compared to vaping, and they save money. They are able to get, you know, more food or a better car or something. There's one guy, one of our customers, he buys the latest device that comes out as well. So the hardware is important too, because that evolves like crazy. You know, it's technology. It stops. It's going. There's a safety risk as well. But they save money, and you know that trickles down into their life. And then all the vapor stores, you know, we employ people. Those people eat pizza places and all that stuff in town. Drink a lot of coffee, and then they also have family as well, and it trickles down. Just, you know, they stopped smoking as well and started vaping, and then we buy lots of stuff. You know, we're always going to Staples. Up 93. That corner is kind of the sacrosanct.
And how many stores did you say that you counted that existed in that area?
Yeah, I think conservatively I was 16. I'm in Salem at 9. There's 18 stores.
And in your opinion, would they have about the same number of customers as you, or more or less?
They probably have a little less.
Okay. And so, consequently, we are talking about a pretty substantial revenue from those stores.
Yes.
You pay taxes?
Yes.
You pay a lot of level of taxes?
Yes.
And have you ever figured out how much those are, or how many taxes you pay? Or?
Yeah, I mean, well, we have our income tax. I mean, I haven't, I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but it's, New Hampshire, it's nice because we have less tax than other states, so that makes it friendly here.
And you do a lot of business in New Hampshire because you have no sales tax, is that right?
Right.
People come from other states to buy?
Yeah, the town right across the border is a Massachusetts town. It's, you know, Plastow has, I think, like 7,000 people in it. Haverhill, which is a town in Massachusetts right over the border, there's, you know, 60,000 people there. So we get a lot of those. You know, we put their phone number in our system, and, you know, 3 out of 4 of them are 978, you know, area codes.
Being a native of South Carolina, I remember how the people from Maryland and Virginia used to travel down to North Carolina to buy their cigarettes by the U-Haul truck full.
Yeah.
Because there was no tax down there.
That's how it is. On the store I operate, it's in Seabrook. And it's connected to a big tobacco beverage store. And people will come up from Beverly, East Boston, you know, sometimes Rhode Island, hour and a half away. And they buy their, you know, their cigarettes and beer and wine sometimes for the month. And they do the same now with vapor products. You know, they'll just come in and clean us out of one flavor. So it's very similar here.
And has it been your experience that when those people come in from out of state, from talking to them and buy the vaping product, right?
They're not what? I'm sorry.
They're not here just to buy. Your product. They make the trip and they buy from other people too.
Yeah.
Including your outlet stores, which I wasn't able to find when I needed to find Target because my bags were lost.
Like other products besides vapor products. Yeah, they go to the food store, they go BJ's, they go, you know, Kohl's, you know, right past the shopping center, that Home Depot, they go buy, you know, all types of stuff there.
What was your background? You had a background in finance, didn't you?
Somewhat, yeah. I was involved in startup companies pretty much since I got out of college. I was involved with a corporation that we started a technology type of division. After that, I got into estate investing. From there, I got involved in a type of technology, like a packaging type technology, where we raised money and got worldwide. So that's why when I saw this industry, I was loving it because it was open season and it was, you know, open and it was busy. I'd go into, you know, one vapor store and there was a line out the door, and I just, you know, how they're getting their products. They were wiring money to China. You know, there's no U.S. distribution of a product, and just show up at their, you know, at the door and sell it to them. And then I started getting involved in retail stores.
And you had enough experience to know exactly how the levels of the economy rely on each other. Is that right?
Yeah.
How do you think the vaping industry fits into that economic structure?
Like total $1 billion market.
It's an important part of the entire.
Yeah.
And growing.
And growing.
You gentlemen have any questions of Jim?
I just want to break it down. I would assume, being that you're within another stone's throw from this building, that a lot of your current customers are probably from Windham too.
Yes.
That's the point I was going to make. I'm sure, because Windham is actually probably less than 8 miles. You're also less than 8 miles that way as the crow flies to the east.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just had a couple of quick questions, if you don't mind, Mr. Bolton.
Yeah.
One was, again, to Mike Plastow, my understanding through some involvement that we both have in terms of municipal water infrastructure. My understanding is that Plastow is looking to make some improvements there, hopefully in the near future, which could drastically impact the economic vitality of that region and southern New Hampshire as a whole. Windham's looking into some of those same things. My question is about the growth of the vaping industry. You mentioned when you started into it, there was maybe one local store that.
I'm looking to expand, and I think, if you open up, I can open up a shop in some areas and just have the same type of business model, and the market is still there without, killing other competitors. I mean, I opened up a large store right down the street from another, up a store here in Salem. So going out of business because there's not enough customers out there.
Okay.
And the growth, I would say, maybe it's still growing about 20%.
Okay, and that's really the question I'm driving at, is are we not just talking about maintaining existing businesses, but we're talking about an industry and all the suppliers and stores associated that's experiencing significant growth,
Yeah,
continued growth?
Yeah.
Okay. And my second question is about flavors and kind of the competition there. One thing I'm trying to figure out, I understand there's a lot of flavors currently. Let's say there's 300. There could be more in the whole industry. But if you have if you have two different flavor companies and they each have an apple flavor, each of those would, per these deeming regulations, would need to be approved, correct, and run through all the hoops associated and all the costs. Yeah. Okay. So if these deeming regulations are somehow impacted to be more business friendly, will that improve competition between the different manufacturers, even within the same flavor?
Yes. Yeah, and I think the newer flavors. I mean, what I was thinking was, if there's two apple flavors, what's the difference between the two? Some taste very similar. Some people like brands over other brands. I mean, but I think it's the newer products that come out and the different ones like blueberry butter toast. There's that newer innovation too is a big part of it.
Okay, but with these current deeming regulations, there will be less competition, more competition between the
less
flavor manufacturers, the hardware manufacturers, less competition.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. No, that's all I had.
Just one question, but can I ask a question about that? Tell me about what are they trying to do to the flavor? They're trying to tax the flavor?
No, they're not trying to tax the flavor. They have regulations. Probably Mike can speak, right, Fred, better than I don't get that. Probably not the best person in this room to speak to, what they're actually, the nuances of it. But they're making it where you have to register and go through an application process.
So I'd be safe to say that they're trying to make it harder to put flavors on the market?
Yeah, I've heard that it's harder to get a vapor product. If the rule goes through, it's harder to get a vapor product on the market than it is to get a new cigarette.
Because listening to your testimony, I would assume that'd be the natural progression, is to get off the nicotine to a flavor. I mean, like myself, I drink usually plain bottled water, but if I have a chance, I usually get Poland Springs lemon flavored. And the same thing with salsa. I get bored of drinking regular salsa, so I might have a raspberry salsa. But they're trying to make it harder and more cost-wise to put flavors on the market.
Yeah, to even keep the ones that are on the market now, and then any new flavors that come out as well.
But being that you're a non-smoker, I would think that the government would embrace you and say, "Well, put new flavors on." The nicotine flavor.
Well, they all
And you don't
have
like the taste of nicotine.
nicotine. Everything that I vape, and even if somebody was to come into the store and say they want to stop smoking, the majority of the bottles have nicotine in them, and they all pretty much are flavored. So I stopped on what was a caramel vanilla tobacco flavor with nicotine, very high level of nicotine. From there, a vanilla flavor with nicotine, and then I, kept stepping down. When somebody smokes, they come in, and like, oh, this is strawberry. I don't want to vape that. Oh, Jolly Rancher. And next thing you know, if they stop, they're vaping that. But you got to get them on the cigarette-y, kind of tastes like a cigarette type of thing.
It's a long way from Camel Lights.
Yeah. And that's just the liquid. I mean, the hardware is a whole different, our store is split up. Basically, 50% of our sales is liquid. And people, it's like the razor blade. You buy the device. Your ticket devices. And instead of flavors, there's features and chips in them and, all kinds of stuff.
Jim, in the liquids, in each liquid, there will be a different percentage of liquids too, is that right? In other words, the testimony I've heard from other people is that, and manufacturers is, let's take apple, let's say there's green apple. In that flavor, they will have varying degrees of percentage of nicotine, the vapors.
Yes.
So that they might have 40 different flavors.
Right.
And under the deeming regulations, they would have had to have an application approved.
All 40?
All 40, for the percentage of nicotine as as well as the flavor. Took the position, and then frankly, in California, San Francisco, and Oakland have admitted it, that the reason they banned the flavor.
To me, I don't know if, some folks think that the reason there's different levels of nicotine or flavors is to get people interested, get people doing it, and ratchet people up. What I'm hearing is it's the exact opposite direction. You start with the amount of nicotine closest to the cigarettes that you've been smoking, and then you step down in the amount of nicotine, natural sorts of things. And I hadn't quite had an understanding of those things, not being a smoker myself, but experience as well, so thank you.
Yeah, when a smoker comes in, you can tell around, like, where am I, when they walk into vapor stores. And you kind of have to, see if you think they're techie, do they have a flip phone? If they do, you don't want to sell them the device with a big screen on it or anything. When they glaze over, you just want something that just, you hit a button. So you pick, tailor the right device, and then you have to figure out the flavor, but each flavor has levels of nicotine. Some people think because they smoked for 30 years, or 40 years to give the highest nicotine level, but sometimes their lungs are too sensitive and you have to go lower. So yeah, it's usually start higher and people work their way down.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Jim, anything else that you want to add from what we've talked about before?
I don't think
Did
so.
you have pictures of your shop? You wanted to talk about your place that people can buy a product, aren't they?
Yeah, but I'd go into vapor stores and there was big, glass cabinets and everything and shiny devices, and there's a big service aspect to the store, where it's going to spend $50 5 minutes with that person, just going over everything, explaining it. So that's why it was set up like a bar. You sit down, you have all your flavors, you can taste all your flavors. You can touch and feel devices, and then people hang out and they meet each other and vape.
So I would say there's a social aspect.
Yeah, big time.
And you can live for a while.
Well, if you'd like to open up in Windham and start giving us some of those taxes as well, that'd be great. You're welcome.
One of the things that Dr. Siegel testified to, or will forget this to run, is that, Jim, is that what you do in your shop is important as a support for the vapor. You find that true?
Yeah, because they'll talk to each other. I mean, a vapor really likes to help a smoker stop. I was sitting at the bar and somebody comes in wanting to stop, they always chime in. The vapor always says, "Oh, I started," and they're not for me. I don't know these people, have any interest. They just say, that's the flavor I stopped on, or that's the device I used, and so that it happens almost every day.
He also testified with regard to the ritual that in his opinion, from his 29 years in all kinds of addiction experience, that those supports are not unlike an AA or some kind of linkage for alcoholics. Is that your view too? This is a support. It's not a medical substitute. It's a support substitute.
Yeah, yeah. And there is that ritual thing, because all the devices, they have a heating element that needs to be changed every couple weeks. Change, modify the heating element like yourself. So people like to tinker with that. They get toolkits and they work on their mod. I mean, it's kind of like a hobby shop in a way, where you tinker with the cars. People tinker with their vapes all the time.
He also, in his opinion, testified that he believes that it's important that that vaping be separated from smoking because it is not the same as Congress has tried to treat it and the Food and Drug has tried to treat it. You agree with that?
Yeah.
The deeming regulations were designed to treat vaping as tobacco. And Jim, when Lou Ritter testified, and he took apart his device, and with each part of it, he said, now that's obviously not tobacco. The next part, that's obviously not tobacco. And when he finished, he had all these parts together. But when I put them together, the regulations say they're tobacco. Right. Gentlemen, that's what the doctor and others will recommend that.
No, we don't need anything. You can just hit the HVAC on fan and it just clears it out. Yeah, you don't smell or anything, no.
And back to the regulations, Fred. The brochure he just gave us, every one of those
let's say green apple again. Let's say they have 70 different variations of that, of the flavor itself, and 70 different variations of nicotine. Each one would have to go through that application at a cost of $500,000 to $2 million. And that was the estimate of the government as to what it would be. Because standards even for what they would say would be approval. In other words, the argument there from the industry is submit these for approval, but you don't tell us what the level will be that you will say is an approval. You won't tell us what the cost will be. We have estimated that it will cost from $500,000 to $1 million that we'll need to satisfy you. And Food and Drugs estimate was that it might go to even $2 million. And so the argument there was it's obviously, Creek testified, that in order to stay in business, they would have to reduce their flavors to 2 in order to stay in business, and that would mean those 2 flavors would not satisfy the people who buy from them. So, and Jim, that's your understanding of the regulation.
Yes.
That's why in Hartley, and one of the hopes of the industry, I think, is that, and the doctor agreed with this, is that coordination flooring